My name is Callum Mercer, 29 years old. August 3rd was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. 43 guests, soft jazz in the background, the venue glowing with string lights that looked like captured stars. Emily, my Emily, stood by my side in a gown that seemed woven out of morning light. Every detail had been chosen with care. Every hour worked to pay for it counted. Every sleepless night on the road justified by this moment. I thought, finally, I could celebrate something I built with my own hands. But Bethany didn't see it that way. She came late, nearly half an hour after the ceremony, breezing through the arched doors in a backless gold dress that clung like she was auditioning for a different spotlight altogether. She didn't smile, didn't say hello, just took a glass of champagne and retreated to a corner, the kind of silence that in my family always meant a storm was gathering. I caught her eye once, tried to hold it. She looked right through me. I'd seen that look before, when she was 17 and I refused to buy her a dress for prom. It wasn't anger, it was something colder, the way someone studies a target. 3 weeks earlier, she'd called sobbing about her car breaking down again. I'd already lent her $1,200 in April for repairs. This time, she said it needed replacing altogether. She said it was urgent. I told her no. Not because I didn't have the money, but because I was exhausted from always being her fallback plan. She hung up mid-sentence. I told myself she wouldn't carry the grudge into my wedding day. I gave her the benefit of the doubt. I always did. The silence before the toast should have warned me. I stood, lifted my glass, ready to thank everyone for coming, ready to speak about peace and building a life with someone who made the world gentler. Bethany rose at the same time. For a heartbeat, I thought she was going to toast too. Then her glass arced through the air. Champagne exploded against the dessert table, shattering the photo frame of Emily and me standing on a Maui cliff. Before the gasp in the room could fade, Bethany grabbed the 3-tiered cake, delicate sugar flowers, weeks of design, hundreds of dollars, and sent it collapsing across the floor. The silence after her scream, "This is what you get for acting like you're better," was so thick I could hear someone's phone buzzing in their purse. My mother rushed to her, clutching Bethany as if she were the wounded party. "She just needs to let it out," she whispered, stroking her hair, like my sister hadn't just turned my wedding into a theater of humiliation. My father looked at me from across the room, his lips tightening around an old script. Be the bigger person. I felt the weight of every time he'd said it before, when Bethany stole from my desk drawer at 15, when she ruined a Thanksgiving by throwing a plate against the wall, when she borrowed my debit card and overdrafted it. Always, it was me who had to swallow. Emily's hand brushed mine under the table. Her whisper was steady. Not here, not now. So I said nothing. I smiled faintly at the guests, murmured a few calming words, nodded to the coordinator. The music stuttered back to life, but the damage was stamped. The night limped forward, dancers moving as if the floor were made of glass. At home, after the gown was hung and Emily's makeup wiped away, silence pressed around us like a verdict. She asked if I was okay. I said I was fine. I wasn't, but I was focused. While she changed, I opened my laptop, logged into the university portal. One click, Bethany's $9,400 tuition deposit revoked. Gone. Then to the rental portal. I was primary on the account. She was just resident. Another click. Lease frozen. Rent due in 5 days. It felt almost too easy. Years of being her lifeline undone in under 10 minutes. I sat in the dim blue glow, remembering the first time she leaned on me. I was 20, working part-time at a copy shop. She was 17. She overdrafted her account buying shoes. Dad told me to fix it, said, "Don't embarrass the family, just cover it." I wired her $50. She hugged me like it was nothing. A pattern born. At 8:40 a.m. sharp, my phone buzzed. Bethany. I let it ring. Then came the texts. What the hell? Why is the portal locked? I can't access anything. Did you do this? I stared at the screen. Coffee steaming in my hand, the smell grounding me in a way her panic couldn't. I didn't answer. Not because I lacked words, but because words had never changed her. Instead, I watched the minute hand tick past 8:41 and whispered to the empty room, this is where the story actually begins. The phone lit again. I muted it. Outside, the city stirred awake, traffic building, horns carrying through the morning air. Inside, the silence stretched, heavy, deliberate, mine. Bethany didn't text for 2 days, which in our language meant she was composing a performance. On the third afternoon, a rhythmic pounding rattled the apartment door. 3 knocks, then a beat, then 3 again, like a kid practicing war drums. Emily checked the peephole. "It's her," she said, voice flat, not surprised, not afraid. She opened the door an inch, the chain holding like a thin line of law between worlds. Bethany didn't say hello. "You froze my lease," she declared, trying to shoulder past the chain. "Rent's due in 3 days. Do you understand what that means?" "It means," Emily said, "you should step back and speak like a person, not a battering ram." Bethany's eyes flicked over Emily's shoulder, searching for me. I stood out of view, letting the hall's chilly air travel across the threshold. "He can't do this," she said louder. "He signed. He has a moral obligation." "I'm the primary," I said, stepping into the doorway. "You're listed as resident. That's not a moral contract, Beth. It's a legal one." Her mouth curled around the nickname like a threat. "You did this because I embarrassed you. One moment and you decided to ruin my life?" Emily unlatched the chain, stepped into the hall, and pulled the door shut behind her, so we were out under the exit sign, washed in red light. "No one is ruining your life," she said, calm as a clock. "Consequences aren't ruin. They're alignment." Bethany laughed once, brittle. "You put your hands on me last time," she said. "You think I forgot?" Emily's posture didn't change. "Last time you tried to force your way in. Today you knock and attempt to wedge your shoulder. If you cross the threshold without being invited, the police will be part of this conversation. Is that what you want?" The hallway hummed with the old building's heat pipes. A door at the far end opened and closed. Bethany lowered her voice, forced something like sincerity into it. "I have class registration. The car needs a repair I can't put off. My boss cut my hours. I sent a plan. I can pay you back in September once my refund comes through." "You've said September before," I said. It turned into January, and then into things are complicated, and then into silence. Her jaw worked. "So you're going to leave me homeless? You're going to watch me get evicted like I'm not your sister?" "You have parents," Emily said, cleanly slicing out the part no one said. "You also had a $9,400 cushion you used to hold over him like a promise. You turned it into leverage. That leverage is gone." Bethany stepped closer until the distance between them was a breath. "Who are you to talk about family?" she hissed. "You grabbed me. You." Emily reached, took Bethany gently by the elbow, and moved her a measured 2 steps back, the way you guide a stranger out of the wrong subway car. "This is your last physical warning," she said, voice still level. "Don't manufacture drama to avoid accountability." For a breath, Bethany looked 10 years younger, like the kid who failed her learner's permit and cried into a towel in our bathroom. Then the expression hardened. "You can't lock a lease," she snapped. "I looked. I have rights." "You have access," I said. "I have authority." She stared at me, and I watched the math in her head fail to equalize. She needed me to be cruel so she could be right. I wouldn't give her that. She yanked her arm out of Emily's hold and walked away without another word, heels striking the corridor like exclamation points. That night, an email arrived from her. Subject line, "Re-immediate." Inside was a spreadsheet of upcoming expenses. Rent, utilities, books, critical health and wellness, a vague category that looked designed to catch anything. There were bullet points about career momentum, a paragraph on mental health, a line item for a podcast mic she needed for a class project. At the end, "If you reinstate tuition, my refund will cover rent. You know this. Please be reasonable." I read it twice, then forwarded it to Emily with a note. "Your turn to read the circus." Emily wrote back from the couch, one eyebrow raised over the top of her laptop. "It's not a circus, it's a fundraiser with guilt confetti." My father called around 10. He opened with a sigh, heavy enough to bend the planet. "Son," he said, "we need to talk about your sister." "I've been talking about my sister for years," I said. "I'm taking a week off from that." "She's spiraling," he said. "She needs a landing. Don't punish her for a bad moment." "It wasn't a moment, it's a pattern, and I'm not punishing. I'm removing myself as her contingency. Family doesn't pull the ripcord on family. Family also doesn't make a wedding a stage because a car died." He started to say, "Be the bigger person." And I quietly set the phone on the counter, let him finish his script to the dial tone of my silence, then hung up. The next day, the group chat arrived like a subpoena. Dad added Mom, me, Bethany, and Emily. Let's have an honest talk without yelling or blocking. We are still a family. Bethany went first, typing a short manifesto about invisibility and how success had corrupted me. She said she acted out because she felt erased and that my response, locking her out, proved I was performatively kind, a phrase she must have practiced. Mom followed with her familiar pastel. Time to move forward. Forgive her while she's still finding herself. She's still your baby sister. Emily left the chat without a word. The little Emily left notification sat like a slapstick cymbal crash in the quiet afterward. I typed 3 sentences and 3 only. She's not a baby. She's 22. She needs to learn the cost of disrespect. Then I muted the thread. No bubbles appeared. The silence was louder than arguing. Late afternoon, the Venmo request hit my phone, $1,800, with the caption, "Cake plus frame. LOL. Let's call it even." For a full minute, I just stared at it, the way you stare at a painting that's meant to provoke you into talking. I handed my phone to Emily and walked out to the balcony where the city smelled like warm rain and old brick. A breeze lifted the corner of our doormat. Inside, faint typing. When I came back, Emily's face was serene in that way that means something surgical has just happened. "What did you write?" I asked. "I itemized," she said. "Cake, 3-tier, custom sugar work, artist's fee, delivery, tip, frame, glass, print replacement, overnight reprint, emotional labor surcharge." Emotional labor surcharge? She shrugged. I told her the surcharge was metaphorical and non-negotiable. I suggested she invoice herself. 15 minutes later, Bethany blocked us both. The request vanished like a trick coin. I felt the old reflex to chase the argument die in my chest without ceremony. That evening, we ate in the quiet, the good kind, the kind that doesn't have to prove anything. After dishes, I pulled up the rental portal again, read every clause like it was a scripture I'd misquoted my whole life. I took screenshots. I saved them in a folder named Boundaries, which would have made me laugh if it didn't make my hands steady. When you've spent a decade being the cushion, you have to relearn what a floor feels like. 2 mornings later, Bethany tried another route. She arrived at the exact minute Emily got home from work, time to slip in behind her as the door opened. Emily didn't scream. She pivoted, gripped a fistful of Bethany's hair, not violence so much as physics, and propelled her back into the hallway with a clean, efficient motion that suggested no malice and no uncertainty. Bethany shrieked, high and theatrical. The door shut. The lock clicked. No breathless aftermath, no trembling hands. Emily poured herself water and drank it like a metronome. My phone lit. Dad again. "Look," he said. "We need to find the middle." "There is no middle between boundary and trespass," I said. "She's hurting." "She always was," I said. "We just kept paying the bill so we didn't have to look at the wound." He exhaled. "This is not who we raised you to be." I thought of his hand at the wedding, palm down, pressing invisible air as if he could smooth the world flat. I thought of the freshman year checkbook lesson, where he showed me how to rewrite a ledger entry to make an overdraft look like it never happened. "You raised me to fix things quietly," I said. I stopped. After we hung up, the group chat flickered back to life. Mom asking for no more aggression, Bethany claiming she'd been physically attacked. She crafted herself the role, a peacemaker, rejected. I watched the framing happen in real time and didn't step into the play. Emily blocked the thread entirely. I left it muted, a museum exhibit behind glass. At midnight, I opened the university portal again. A faint banner at the bottom read, "Payment may be reassigned by an authorized family member." I hadn't noticed it before. A thought, quick and cool, slid under my skin. Of course, there was always another card to play in our house. We never lacked parachutes. We just pretended the jump was braver than it was, sus. The next morning, I sat with coffee and made a list. Old auto-pays to scrub, accounts to close, passwords to change. Each tick felt like suturing a place I hadn't realized was bleeding. When I finished, the apartment felt bigger by an inch. Toward evening, my phone chimed with a new email from Bethany. Subject: "Are you seriously doing this?" The body was shorter this time, stripped of spreadsheets, all declaration. "You've taken this too far. Reinstate the tuition and unlock the lease, or I will take legal action." She attached a screenshot of a tenant rights blog post highlighted in neon yellow. I wrote back one line. I'll speak with the property manager directly. Please direct further correspondence to them. Then I CC'd the manager and closed my laptop like a judge tapping a gavel. For the first time in weeks, the night didn't feel like a waiting room. Emily dozed with her book half open on her chest. I stood at the window and watched the city turn itself down, storefronts dimming, cab lights thinning, a last bus grumbling past. Somewhere below, a couple laughed too hard at something small. I felt the laugh in my ribs like a reminder that life could be ordinary and good, even next to a family that thrives on narrative. When I finally slept, I dreamed of a hallway that used to end at a locked door and now opened onto a set of stairs. I didn't climb them yet. I just noticed they were there, and that was enough. Friday night, the eve of my father's birthday party, cousin Kara texted a photo that made my stomach twist. Bethany stood in the middle of my parents' living room in a white jumpsuit that looked dangerously close to bridal. Her hair was curled into glossy spirals, her arm hooked around a man I didn't recognize. Kara's caption read, "Some real estate guy. Met him 2 weeks ago." Beneath that, she keeps saying big things are coming. The next morning, we found out what the big thing was. On Instagram, a trailer dropped for a new podcast, Bloodline Bruises, Growing Up with the Golden Child. The title font was crimson, the background a family portrait blurred beyond recognition. Bethany's voiceover began. I thought family meant safety, but sometimes the most toxic people are the ones who share your last name. Dramatic piano underscored every syllable. I watched the teaser twice, once with sound, once with captions. At the end, she thanked her sponsor, an online therapy app, ironically, the same one I had recommended a year earlier when she called me sobbing in a bar bathroom. They reposted her video to their own account. 10,000 views in 24 hours. The comments called her brave, relatable, and inspiration. Emily stood behind me, arms folded, watching the screen. She's not telling a story, she said. She's selling one. A week later, Bethany emailed me. The subject line, "Let's talk." The body. I'd like to meet. No drama, just a conversation. I have things I want to tell you. I think you'll be proud of me. Emily read it twice and set my phone down carefully, as if it were hot. She's not trying to fix anything, she said. She's setting a trap. I replied with one line. Emily will be there too. Bethany never answered. 3 nights later, the doorbell rang at 7:15 p.m. My parents stood on the other side. No warning, no call. My father gave a small wave, casual, as though this was just a friendly visit. My mother had her purse slung heavy on her shoulder, the kind of weight that suggested she wasn't just dropping by. We just want to talk calmly, she said. I told them they had 3 minutes. They walked in anyway. Emily stayed in the kitchen, arms crossed, her silence sharper than any words. Mom started. Bethany is going through a transformative period. She's made mistakes, yes, but the podcast is just her way of processing. You shouldn't take it personally. Processing? Emily said from the counter, her voice level. She destroyed a wedding cake and called it justice. That's not processing, that's performance. Dad raised his hand, the universal signal for peace. She wants a relationship with you. She just doesn't know how to say it. I looked at him. Has she told you that? Or is that what you're hoping I'll believe? Neither of them answered. My mother fidgeted with her purse strap, and that's when I saw it. A folded piece of paper peeking from the zipper pocket, cream with black ink, stamped with faint letters. Family Contingency Trust. Disbursement. She tucked it back too quickly, but not before my mind caught it like a hook. Emily caught my eye across the kitchen. She'd seen it too. Then Mom spoke words that froze the air. She's moved back in with us, temporarily, just until she figures things out. Emily exhaled hard enough to be heard. The picture sharpened. They had paid her tuition themselves, taken her back into their home, and now they were here, not to ask, but to manage. I asked one question. Have either of you told her what she did at the wedding was wrong? Mom's lips pressed thin. She was overwhelmed. Dad shook his head. She didn't mean to ruin it. That wasn't my question, I said. Silence. Heavy, guilty, familiar. That told me everything. They weren't angry at her. They were embarrassed. And the quickest way to dissolve embarrassment was to transfer the weight onto me. I'm done, I said finally. Done with the money, the guilt, the games. If you want to keep funding her life, that's your decision, but it won't come from me. Not anymore. My mother blinked quickly, the way she did when tears threatened but never fell. My father looked at me with that weary, disappointed expression, the one he used when I refused to smooth over Bethany's tantrums as a teenager. "You've raised a daughter who believes consequences don't exist," I said. "Congratulations." I opened the door. They hesitated. Dad paused, his voice low, almost confessional. "There are things you don't understand about our finances." "There always were," I said. They stepped out into the hallway. The door shut. The lock clicked. Emily poured 2 glasses of wine and slid one toward me. She didn't say anything. She didn't have to. The silence was an agreement. No more playing their game. I sat with the glass in my hand, staring at the closed door, at the space my parents had just left. My thoughts circled back to that folded slip of paper in Mom's purse. Family contingency trust. A safety net I'd never been allowed to see. And suddenly, the years of pressure made cruel sense. The following week, our apartment felt like a bunker carved out of noise. Calls slowed. Texts dried. Even the group chat turned into a ghost town. For the first time in months, I could hear the hum of the refrigerator and the scrape of Emily's pen against her notebook, without Bethany's drama bleeding through the walls. It was intoxicating. One night, Emily leaned over the table while we finished reheated pasta. "We need air," she said. "Not a day, not a weekend. Something bigger." I thought of the calendar pinned above my desk, crammed with work deadlines, family obligations, repayment reminders. The thought of white space terrified me as much as it thrilled me. "How big?" I asked. Her smile curved slow, certain. "The Maldives." By morning, the decision felt inevitable. We booked 2 round-trip tickets for 6 weeks later. No layovers, no shared calendars, no family. Just water and sun. That afternoon, I sat with a spreadsheet of our savings. For the first time in years, I wasn't calculating how much I could spare for someone else. I was measuring what it would take for us to disappear into peace. Bethany must have sensed the shift. 2 days after the tickets were confirmed, my phone buzzed. A single message, no words, no context, just a fire emoji. I showed Emily. She didn't flinch. "Perfect," she said. "Let it burn." She blocked the number. I followed. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was clean. Still, I wasn't naive. Late at night, I double-checked the locks, changed passwords, stripped old autopays from my accounts. Each click was like cutting loose a rope I hadn't realized was strangling me. I created a new folder on my laptop labeled Boundaries, stuffed with screenshots, lease agreements, portal confirmations, bank statements scrubbed of her name. A museum of emancipation. Cousin Kara sent a DM. Her sponsor pulled out. Comments are turning. She deleted 3 episodes. I didn't feel triumphant. Just inevitability. The kind of gravity that drags false stories back to earth. 6 weeks passed, in a blur of small preparations. Packing lists, passport checks. I bought a suitcase that rolled smoother than my old one, a petty luxury that felt like a declaration. Emily teased me for overfolding my shirts, then quietly tucked sunscreen into the side pocket. The flight out was smooth. I watched Emily sleep against the window as we crossed endless water, her breath steady, her body finally unclenched. For the first time in years, my own chest rose and fell without that coiled weight pressing from the inside. The bungalow stood over turquoise water, stilts planted like prayers. The floorboards hummed with the tide beneath us. Inside, a sign was nailed to the wall in carved wood. No clocks. Let time be yours again. I stood staring at those words longer than I should have. They felt like an instruction manual for something I'd forgotten. How to exist without obligation. On the 4th morning, we ate breakfast on the deck while waves slapped against the stilts. Emily speared a slice of papaya and asked, almost casually, "Do you think they'll ever admit it?" I didn't ask who she meant. "No," I said, "but I think they know. Not in words, not where anyone can hear it, but in that silence they fall into when I refuse to play. They know." The sunlight hit her cheek and she smiled, small and soft. "Good," she said. "That's enough." Later that afternoon, while Emily napped in the hammock, I checked my email for the first time in days. Among the flight confirmations and credit alerts sat a notice from the apartment management company. Final signature required on Bethany's old lease. Routine. I skimmed down the page and stopped cold. Alternate guarantor on file, FC Trust. The same initials I'd glimpsed on that folded paper in my mother's purse. Family Contingency Trust. So it hadn't been about lack. It had been about leverage. They had always had a safety net. They just chose not to use it until I refused to. I sat back, staring at the horizon where sea bled into sky. A strange calm spread through me. Anger would have been easy, but what I felt was colder, quieter. Clarity. The tide lapped below, steady, unconcerned. For the first time, I let myself match it. We came back from the Maldives with skin warmed by sun and lungs full of air that still smelled faintly of salt. The city looked smaller on return, its noises more distant, its demands less sharp. Emily and I unpacked slowly, deliberately, as if stretching the trip into our apartment walls. She folded sarongs into drawers. I tucked seashells into a bowl by the window. Every gesture was an anchor to a calmer life. We moved 3 months later, farther from the center, into a quieter neighborhood where porches sagged under flower boxes and moths danced under yellow porch lights. The rent was reasonable, the air cleaner, the night softer. For the first time in years, the lease papers bore only our names. No Bethany, no co-signers, no alternate guarantors tucked into footnotes. I cut up the old debit card she once borrowed, opened a new credit account, changed every password I'd recycled for 6 years. Each change was a door closing in the right direction. The podcast fizzled out. Episode 2 painted me a narcissist. Episode 3 titled itself, When They Make You Look Crazy. By 4, the comments dwindled. Sponsors vanished. By 5, silence. I didn't listen, but Kara did. She messaged one night. She's stretching the truth so hard it doesn't even make sense anymore. People stopped buying it. Bethany enrolled in part-time classes again, this time paid by my parents. Kara said they dipped into an emergency fund, the one tucked away for rainy days. I almost laughed. Rainy days had been every day for me, and they'd kept the umbrella folded until I refused to be soaked. The truth was sharp, but it didn't wound. It freed. Evenings in the new place became a kind of ritual. Emily and I sat on the porch with glasses of wine, watching the neighbor's dog chase moths, the kind of small spectacle that feels enormous when your life has stopped bleeding out. We talked about books we wanted to read, places we wanted to travel, the restaurant concept Emily was sketching in a notebook, conversations that didn't circle back to damage control. Real conversations about a real future. Sometimes my phone buzzed with a generic text from my mother. Hope you're well. I let them pass without answer. My father called once about a mechanic. He didn't mention Bethany. The silence between us had grown into something functional, like scar tissue, stiff but protective. One night, as crickets sang in the hedges, Emily asked, "Do you think she'll ever apologize?" I thought about it, about Bethany at 17 crying over a failed driver's test, about her at 22 screaming over cake, about her at 23 behind a podcast microphone. "No," I said, "but I don't need it anymore. The apology isn't the currency. The distance is." She leaned her head against my shoulder. "Then we're rich." I smiled at that. She was right. The family contingency trust lingered in my mind sometimes. I pictured the folded paper in Mom's purse. The safety net dangled, but never offered. It explained years of speeches about scarcity, of moralizing about sacrifice while leverage sat hidden. It didn't make them villains. It made them human, flawed, frightened, willing to twist truth to manage appearances. Bethany never reached out again. No apology, no thanks, no more fire emojis, just absence. And absence, I learned, can be a gift. I stopped waiting for the phone to light up. I stopped listening for the doorbell. I stopped rehearsing comebacks for conversations that would never happen. Sometimes fire doesn't need to be fought. Sometimes you let it burn itself out, and you walk away finally warm. And that's what we did.